Hello, virtual English 2 students, and welcome to today's presentation via the interwebs. My name is Paul Davidson, your English teacher, but you already knew that. Today, we're going to be talking about your thematic state project, the project you're going to do to help wrap up this Langston Hughes unit that we have been studying for the past couple of weeks. So without further ado, here's what I want you to do. So the Walkers of the Dawn thematic statement project. A thematic statement is what a piece of media has to say about an idea. For the past 2 weeks that we have been studying has been the Walkers of the Dawn section of Langston Hughes's collection of poems, The Dreamkeeper and Other Poems. These poems explore a plethora of ideas. For this project, I want you to select one of those ideas and explain what Hughes has to say about it through his poetry. You're going to use text evidence to support your, and you're going to use text evidence to support your claim. Keep in mind that I'm wanting you to look at what idea the entire section of the poetry is talking about as a whole. So all 14 poems, I want you to look at the bigger idea. So you're not just picking one poem and telling me what the idea is. You're going to pick multiple poems and say that they all work towards this common idea that Langston Hughes is trying to express through this piece of media. So you'll need to refer to multiple poems to help support your claim. You can do any of the following for your project. So you can write an essay, present a speech, make a poster, make an infographic, create a video, or create a podcast. The project can really be anything. All I ask is that if you choose an option not listed above, you run it by me first. Your project will have an introduction, a body, and conclusion. And I'll go much more in depth with this in the PowerPoint that I'm about to show, but just as on the assignment sheet here, a brief explanation. An introduction, and this part of your project, you'll introduce us to both the idea that you chose and the thematic statement that Hughes is making about that idea. The latter of which will be your thesis statement, and I'll show you how to do a thematic thesis statement. Body, in this part, you'll provide evidence and an explanation of how the evidence proves the thematic statement. And then your conclusion. To wrap up your project, you'll discuss why the thematic statement you chose is relevant and important to our society today to consider. So that is the project. It can be over anything, but you need to kind of have those three elements to it. Here is a PowerPoint that I usually run by whenever we do theme stuff. Now, this is going to talk about essay per se, but the same thing applies to any of the other projects. Like if you do a poster, you're going to need to establish, here's what the idea is. You're going to need to have, of course, your evidence, and then you're going to have to wrap it up and show it why the theme is relevant to people that live in the world today. And the same thing can go for like a podcast or a speech or you name it. You're still going to need to have those particular elements. But just because it's easier, it's going to say essay throughout this. So thematic statements versus topics. This is the first big thing we kind of have to tackle. So theme is a lesson the reader learns from the text. It is a universal truth and it is always written as a statement. So you can look at life decisions can be hard. Life has many roads. Regret can stifle life. Courage can be seen in unlikely people. Those are all themes. Those are all thematic statements. Those are all ideas that the work could be talking about. Topics are one or two broad words. So an example of this would be choices, regret, journeys, adventure, love, happiness, empathy, isolation, courage. If we go back up to the thematic statements, life and decisions, those would be topics. Life, once again, regret can be a topic. Courage is a topic. It's not a theme. It's not a thematic. So what do we do about that? Well, it isn't to say that topics are bad. You need them to actually help you create your thematic statement. So your thematic statement actually grows out of the seed that is the topic. And if we were face to face, I would be saying, hey, just right now we're going to list on the board a couple of topics that Langston Hughes kind of taught, or ideas that Langston Hughes talked about in poems. And just off the top of my head, like there's equality. He talks about gender a little bit with Aunt Sue's stories and Mother to Son. You can kind of see some gender-based stuff within there. Of course, race, equality. He talks about perseverance. He talks about hope. He talks about pride. Those are all different ideas that he talks about. And he talks about many more that you could possibly look into. Those are just 7 just off the top of my head. So what you just need to do is pick an idea that Langston Hughes explores. Then what you're going to do, we're going to turn those topics / ideas into thematic statements. All you have to do there is just simply insert the topic idea into the following sentence and complete the sentence. The author believes that blank. So Langston Hughes believes that blank. Based off our interaction with Langston Hughes' work, that is going to help us understand this is what he thinks. So the author believes blank. Fill in the blank. How you complete the sentence is essentially your thematic statement. So essentially, that's what your thematic statement would be. You fill in the blank. So the author believes that equality, blah, 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 blah. Now, here's the thing. Warning, you need to make sure your thematic statement isn't vague. What do I mean like that? You could say, the author believes that equality is important. That's vague. You need to be more specific. Equality is good. Believes that racism is bad. Those are not good themes because they are vague. You need a thematic statement needs to be specific. So the complexity is key. If you have a vague thematic statement, then this question, why about it? Why is racism bad according to Langston Hughes? Why is equality good according to Langston Hughes? Why is hope important according to Langston Hughes? Answering the question why is the key to taking your vague thematic statement and turning it into something specific that can be used and developed and honed and actually have a point to it instead of just a overarching vagueness. That is the key. Do not be vague. So a thematic statement, your thematic statement will become your thesis statement, essentially. A thesis statement just clearly states the topic of the composition. It not only helps focus the main point of the essay by stating what you're going to prove in your paper, but gives the reader an exact understanding of what will be covered. A thesis statement declares your own unique perspective, your take on the subject. Most of the time at this stage of your writing, and most of the time in writing in general, the thesis statement will be the last line of the introduction. So here's an example of just a thesis statement. Australia represents a country represents the best country for a vacation. If you remember way back, a thesis statement needs to have 3 parts. You need to have the topic that you're talking about. You need to have an analysis verb, a verb that shows thought, and then you need to have the thing you're going to prove. Our topic is Australia. Our analysis verb is represents, and the best country for a vacation is the idea we're going to prove. Now, literary thesis statements are a little bit different. A literary thesis includes the author's name and the title of the work along with what you're going to prove. So I'm going to pop out here for a second. That means all of your thesis statements will look similar because you're all writing about the same work that we've studied. Your ideas will be different. The latter half, your thematic statements will be different, but your beginning part will all contain the following information. In fact, here, I'm going to pull up the word battle. Yeah, word battle will work. I'm going to pull up word battle, and I'm going to show you essentially what your thematic statements will look like. All of your thematic statements will start off somehow like this, and it's going to freeze. Sorry. There we go. So all of your thematic statements will be something along the lines of this. Walkers with the Dawn by Langston Hughes. Or in Walkers with the Dawn, comma, Langston Hughes explores, blah, 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 blah. All of your thesis statements will have Walkers with the Dawn and Langston Hughes in them. All of your thesis statements will have Walkers with the Dawn in them and Langston Hughes, because that is the thing that you are writing about, is Walkers with the Dawn by Langston Hughes. The place where it becomes different is the latter half, where you're going to have your thematic statement, the thing you're going to prove. So a literary thesis statement needs to include an author's name, the title of the work, and along with what you're going to prove, the thematic statement. So here's some examples of literary thesis statements. In a separate piece, John Knowles portrays jealousy as an element of friendship. The idea that they originally started with was jealousy, or you could say the idea they started with was friendship, and they're going to say that this book says that that jealousy is trying to tell us that jealousy is an element of friendship. In the novel Separate Peace, John Knowles illustrates how a person creates his or her own peace. A Separate Peace by John Knowles illustrates the destructive results caused by distrust. All of those are literary statements. All of those work very well. Could do in quote, walkers of the dawn, end quote, comma, or comma, end quote, Langston Hughes betrays, blah, 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 in the section of poetry, comma, or quote, walkers of the dawn, end quote, or comma, end quote, Langston Hughes illustrates, blah, 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 a separate, quote, walkers of the dawn, end quote, by Langston Hughes illustrates, blah, 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 blah. Why am I putting those walkers of the dawn in quotes? It's because it is a smaller part of a larger whole. If it was the Dreamkeeper and Other Poems, we put it in italics, like A Separate Peace is in italics. But since it's not, you had to put it in quotations because it's a smaller, bigger whole. So let us continue on to this. This is just to show you that a statement doesn't always have to be author's name and title, analysis, verb, thematic statement. You can flip it around. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee uses character actions to show that courage can be seen in unlikely people. We flip that around. Character actions show that courage can be found in unlikely people in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. So that's how to get your thesis statement, the idea that you're going to be talking about. Now let's actually start writing the script or writing the essay that you're going to present. So a thematic analysis introduction draft. So here's how you're going to write an introduction for this. You're going to include relevant background information on the setting, specific characters, plot, summary, etc. In the last sentence of the paragraph, your thesis statement. So you're just going to give us important information we need to know. And the last sentence should be your thesis statement. Now, another thing that I always include that I probably need to put on this PowerPoint is how people normally start this. Most of the time people start this talking about the topic or the idea in general, and then they get more and more specific to what the author is specifically saying about that in their work. Here's an example of this. So the thematic statement is can exist in horrific conditions. If we were to shrink that down to the one-word idea, the one-word topic, it would be empathy. And they start off by talking about what empathy is in general. Empathy is a virtue that not all people have. They just start talking about what empathy is. So empathy is a virtue that not all people have. To be able to understand other people's feelings, motives, or situation efforts, since we live in such a judgmental society. Anne Frank, who was a young Jewish girl, went into hiding for 3 years, trying to escape being killed by the Nazis during World War II. Under dire circumstances, Anne showed empathy in her many diary entries. Anne Frank, the Diary of a Young Girl, shows that empathy can exist in horrific conditions. No, the reason why this isn't Anne Frank, the Diary of Anne Frank, is because Anne Frank was the author, so it just was redundant at that point. You eliminate the Anne Frank, the second Anne Frank. Shows would be kind of our analysis verb, showing us thinking, and then the thing we're thinking about, the thing we're going to prove is empathy can exist in horrific conditions. This is the last sentence of the introduction. This is our thesis statement, and I just threw everything over it. There we go. That is our thesis statement. So whenever you do yours, we go back up to the one-word idea that you started off with, that then you turned it into a thematic statement. You shrink it back down to the one word and talk about what that one word means in your own words, in your own thoughts. What is that one word? And then pivot to specifically how Langston Hughes thinks about that word through this work. All right, so that is how to do the introduction. Now let's move on to the actual body of your project. So your assertions, the topic sentences of your body paragraphs. So basically, these are the things that you say are brought to light. So the example they have is war brings out the best and worst in people. Empathy can be a struggle for teenagers, and understanding yourself is important for understanding others. This also could be different poems that you could also be focusing in on. These are your reasons will prove your thesis statement to be true. Each assertion will be developed into a well-written body paragraph using text evidence, so using evidence, quoting lines from text to support your claim, to support that idea, accompanied by a proper citation. You need to make sure you have a citation. We'll review citations tomorrow in the future. Right now, we just need to focus on writing this before we actually start citing it. But that's how you do the body paragraphs. You're just going, so with the body paragraphs, you're going to you're going to point to poems, and you're going to point to lines inside the poems that help talk the thematic statement, that help prove that this is what Langston Hughes thinks. You're going to need to explain how that line of text you pulled from the poem connects into everything else. Your theme analysis outline, this is just a way that you could possibly do some pre-writing for it. An outline is kind of like a foursquare, except it's written straight up and down. The important thing here, though, is down here at the very bottom when we talk about the conclusion, how to end this thing. So I talked about how your conclusion needs to show how your theme is relevant to the world today, and that's what your conclusion will do. You need to wrap up your essay by showing your theme into today's society. You need to summarize the main points of your body paragraph in there, and then restate your thesis, but in a slightly different way. You're not going to copy and paste the thesis word for word. You're going to rephrase it. Here's an example, and let's back it up. Courage is a quality that is evident in many characters in To Kill a Mockingbird. That is the stated of the thesis earlier that we saw. Whether it comes from an unlikely character like Boo Radley or more traditional protagonists like Atticus, courage is a vital part of what drives them. That's the summarizing of the points that they make. And here's how they connect it to the world today. It is important to the wider world. This quality is not just important in a famous novel written in the 1950s, seen every day in our world today. The soldiers who have fought for our country through wars and history, a great amount of courage. They choose to put their life in danger for Americans who are total strangers to them. Courage is within everybody, and it can appear at the most unlikely time, showing how the idea exists in the world today, how it impacts our society today, impacts us today. So that's how to go about writing a script, or kind of writing the introductory portion of your project, or in the concluding portion of your project, and the body. So if you have any questions, make sure to email me, and I'll talk about that here in a second. Just a reminder, here's what your project is. So what I want you to do is I want you to write an essay, present a speech, make a poster, make an infographic, create a video, or create a podcast, or anything as long as you run it by me, in which you tell me what was the thematic statement. You're going to pick one of the ideas that Langston Hughes explores through Walkers of the Dawn and explain what he has to say about it, what the thematic statement of Walkers of the Dawn is. And that is the project. It will be due as of right now, Sunday, and you have the rest of the week to work on it. And if you have any questions, please email me, pdavidson@portageal.k12.mo.us. And until next time, I'll see you around. Later. Bye-bye.